Good evening, everyone, and welcome back to another episode of the Wellness FOURplay podcast. My name is Dr. Dondee Nettles, and I'm your host tonight. And tonight we're going to talk about 4 ways of preserving your food. Now, it's important to understand if you want to have food on hand when you or your family needs it, there's going to be some really cool ways you can implement to preserve that food so you're not constantly having to rely on fresh food. But you can preserve food when it's fresh so that when it comes to eating it weeks, months, years later, it is still going to be fresh and palatable and tasty. And that's what we're going to get into today's episode. So if you're catching this episode live, please do me a favor and put hashtag live in the comments below. And if you're catching this on Stitcher or iTunes or anywhere else on Spotify, please welcome it. Please listen to it every day. Please like it. Please share it. And just thank you so much for tuning in and making wellness an important part of your life. If you're looking at the term, and this is your first time here, and you're looking at the way FOURplay is spelled, it is not misspelled. It is intentionally spelled foreplay because the whole thing about we're kind of playing on the word foreplay, which is typically used to get you in the mood. Wink, wink, nudge, nudge. Know what I mean? And this time we're talking about getting you in the mood for wellness, getting you in the mood to be your own health advocate, to be your own conspirator in your approach and your quest to wellness, all areas of wellness. And on the Wellness FOURplay podcast, we are going to really look at wellness from a whole perspective. A couple episodes ago, we talked about what is wellness. It is being whole, talking about the whole aspect of wellness, emotional wellness, relationship wellness, yes, physical wellness, but financial wellness as well. In all areas of your life, if you are well, then you are truly well. And the E being empowered. You are empowered. You're given permission to go forward and be your own health advocate. Like I said, you're constantly learning, which is the first L, and you're learning more information, becoming more valuable to yourself and your family. And then you're loving, you're sharing, you're giving back what you've learned. And that is where true wellness comes from. So we're going to talk today about 4 ways that you can preserve food. Starting right now. You don't need to have any experience. You just need to have the desire. The first one and the easiest you're already familiar with, and that is freezing. So you can take food, whether it's produce, fresh vegetables, fresh fruit, fresh meats, and you can freeze them. Now, the best results in freezing so that you can avoid freezer burn, which is going to decrease the longevity of whatever you're freezing, and it's going to probably change the taste a little bit and make it not so good. So how do you get around the freezer burn situation? One, use a proper receptacle, whether it is a bag that is meant for freezer, a Ziploc bag as an example, some kind of container, Tupperware or something like that, or you're using some kind of wrap. The best thing to do is to get all the air that is around it, or as much of the air that is around your food item, get it out, because the whole purpose of preserving food is to stop the breakdown of that food, to stop microorganisms, bacteria, and things of that nature breaking down the food, because that's what actually makes the food unable to eat, and you wouldn't want to eat it anyway. You want to keep it from breaking down, and you want to stop that process of microorganisms. So the best way to do that, or the easiest way that we're all familiar with, is freezing. So the best way and the easiest way, if you're familiar with it, you can't, or if you're not familiar with it, this is probably the optimal way of freezing. Use some kind of device that removes the air, like a vacuum sealer, as an example. Or if you're using Ziploc bags, use freezer ready or freezer made Ziploc bags, or some kind of container that is meant to go in the freezer. That's how you're going to get the best results, lessen your likelihood of having freezer burn, and preserve that as long as possible, whether it's fruits, vegetables, or meats and proteins, whatever the case may be. Again, in summary, for freezing, the easiest way, use freezer intended bags or containers. And ideally, if you're going to use bags, use vacuum sealed. It's the best result. Well, the next thing you can get into as far as preserving food is canning. Now, most of you are familiar with that because you buy things in cans. You buy things off the shelf of your grocery store that are in glass containers that are canned. Sometimes they have indefinite shelf life. Sometimes they have, months or years or whatever, but it's a great way of preserving food. Now, canning, there's going to be basically 2 options. The first one is going to be in canning type glass jars that you put whatever you're canning, whether it's a fruit or a vegetable or even meat, and you can put it in glass canning jars and then put it in boiling water. The boiling water obviously heats up the contents of that glass jar, killing the microorganisms, and literally it sucks the air out of or through that container and vacuum seals it. Then you just put the seal on the top and you're good to go. The other way of canning is using a vacuum or a pressure canner. Be careful if you're using this and you've never done it before, because it can be dangerous. It pressurizes the container. Usually there's some screws involved. There's some heavy industrial type metal containers that you do this in, where you put a series of jars in there, you put it under pressure, and it pressure seals this. You can definitely do that. You can do this with things like okra and green beans and things of that nature. You can also use with meats. You can do relishes. You can add some fruits and some spices and some things. And so the key here is you can do it, one, in glass containers where you're pressurizing it by putting it in a pressure container, or the other way is just putting it in boiling water. And usually if you did a YouTube search, you could find out ways of canning. Well, the other way is pickling. So the third way we can preserve food is pickling. You're all used to that because of what pickles, whether it's dill pickles or sweet pickles, it is pickling of cucumbers. So how do you do that? Typically with vinegar. You can also use salt brine. You can use mixtures of that. And there's ways of doing that, but actually pickling is a very good way of doing fruits and vegetables. Corn, carrots, okra, green beans, things of that nature. And if you chop up vegetables in small little particles, I was kind of saying this with the canning, is you can add fruits, you can add spices along with your brining, and you can create relishes, and another way of pickling certain vegetables and fruits, and actually even meats as well. Now, the fourth way to preserve food is dehydrating or drying. And you can do that in the air. You can do it in the oven. Or if you're going to be doing lots of it, I would highly recommend you invest in an inexpensive electric dehydrator. So that's going to give you the most longevity. It's going to be the most rapid. And the key with drying, when you are ready to dry foods, whether it's apricots or whether it's peaches or whether it's cherries or whether it's tomatoes and you're going to sun dry them, however you want to do it, or if it's meats and you want to do things like jerky, the key here is to make sure that it's ready to eat as is and there's no bruising. Then you can dry it for the best results, and it can literally have almost an indefinite shelf life. But look at it in the way you can do it in the air. You can air dry these things. You can do it in the sun, like with tomatoes. You can do it with like apricots and apples and pineapples and things like that, or you can oven dry them. It's going to be a little bit more rapid because you can put it in a slightly heated oven. Or the best way, in my opinion, is electric dehydrator. Then you can put them in Ziploc bags. You can pressurize them, or take the vacuum sealer kind of bags, and usually have some snacks for long term. So I would highly recommend, especially with summer coming, and then as you go in from late summer into fall where things don't grow and they don't grow in winter, have your pantry stocked, have your cabinet stocked of things you can preserve food. And you might as well start toying around with it now, so that when you want it, you've got the food there, so you're not learning on the fly. So, and you never know what's going to happen in the world. So it's always best to be prepared. So the 4 ways that I would highly recommend that you preserve food are going to be freezing, canning, pickling, and drying. So hopefully you got some value out of this. Hopefully you take on some DIY approaches in your kitchen. Make some videos if you would. Tag me in it if you would. And if you got any value out of today's Wellness FOURplay episode, please do me a favor and share it. Comment on it. I would truly appreciate that. If you're catching this on the replay and it happens to be in your social media, whether you're watching it on a LinkedIn or Facebook or YouTube, please do me a favor and put hashtag replay in the comments below so that I can thank you personally. And again, as always, if you find value in this, please share it forward. If you know anybody who's looking to preserve food, let them get this and as a teaser, and then they can go do further research on actually the implications of it or the actual details of how to do it. There's plenty of YouTube videos on it. But again, you can preserve your own foods in the ways that I would recommend are going to be freezing, canning, pickling, and drying. Thank you so much, my friends, for tuning in. Have a wonderful day. Stay tuned tomorrow for another episode of the Wellness FOURplay podcast. I am Dr. Dondee Nettles, signing out. Have a great day. Bye-bye.